Okay? Yep. Okay. Good evening. This is the meeting of the Trail Coordination and Management Committee, Trails Committee. It's a joint meeting with the Select Board. Just before we get started, I want to let people know it is also being recorded remotely, and so it's available by remote. The key item from that is that your screens can be seen, so things can be screenshot from that. Starting off as introduction, are there any public comments? We have two. Jane Moran, and please identify yourself, and you come up to a mic would be ideal.
Well, thank you, and good evening, everyone. Hi. My name is Jane Moran, 70 East Main Street, and I'm speaking as a private citizen. The Upper Charles Trail Committee, following this past town meeting, when our CPC funds were approved by the voters, the committee voted to authorize VHB Engineering to proceed with pre-engineering studies for Segment 1, the area from Hopkinton State Park to East Main Street. Previously, we had hand-delivered to each resident of Legacy Farms North of our intentions to build a multi-use trail through their neighborhood. The folks I spoke to while delivering these notices were thrilled and very supportive. So my question to both the Trails Club and to TCMC, specifically tonight, is what have you done to advance the Western Alternative route since town meeting? The alternative to proceeding along the short distance of Hayden Row, what have you done to advance your proposal? At your last meeting, you spoke of the Gorman property, a vital and necessary piece of property for the Western Alternative, being under the Mass General's Law, Chapter 61. Yes, this is true, and they have been under the forestry program of Chapter 61 since 1997. It is also true that under the Mass General laws, when the property owner wishes to sell their land, they must notify the town within a year of the sale. It is also true that the town has the first right of refusal if the owner first does not want to pay back the back taxes. It is also true that the town would have to pay, according to the law, full and fair market value for the property. You also mentioned at the last meeting that you were in conversation with a realtor to help assist you in writing a letter to the Gorman family. My question is, why would you consult with a realtor? Why would you not just consult with the Gorman family? Could it be that they gave you a similar answer that they gave the Upper Charles Trail Committee a few years ago? The Upper Charles Trail Committee moved away from the Hayden Row approach after the citizens voiced their concerns for two reasons. The first, that the TCMC took on the task of making the Western Alternative work, and that approach was given to the folks as an alternative for the past 2 years or more. The second is that the school committee and the town moved forward with a plan to build a new school in the area and have already identified that that road will need engineering studies that we had previously started to do, but we moved away from that when we saw that the school and the town were going to go in that direction. So we moved forward on to Segment 1, and we made that clear over our meetings over and over again, that we had dropped Hayden Row and that we were moving on to Segment 1. The Upper Charles Trail has always confirmed that the multi-use trail system that the Select Board charged us to build with will be accessible to folks of all abilities and of all accessibilities, including such folks as skateboarders, longboarders, and folks who prefer off-road. Using a hard surface, as indicated, was a preference with the planning board's most recent study. And also, in some instances, stone dust, where applicable. It is true that the Center Trail and the Echo Trail are not going anywhere. The TCMC and the Trails Club have over the years strongly identified stone dust as a preference. This is fine if the folks in town realize that a stone dust trail will not work on steep grades, that this trail needs to be built, especially coming from Hopkinton State Park down to East Main Street, where the grade level is quite steep. And also, if we don't plan for those needs, the Mass DOT money, grant money, would not be applicable for us to use. And the millions of dollars that we hope to get from the state and federal government, we could only get if we built the trail to those standards. So this is why we asked VHB to plan to these specs, these specifications. If we had asked VHB to plan a stone dust path, that is what they would have done. But that was not what the Upper Charles Trail Committee chose to do. We chose to pursue it so that it could be available to folks of all accessibilities. Again, so what has the TCMC done to plan this trail that the Upper Charles Trail has not already planned? Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. With regard to the western route, as I'm sure you're aware, the funds don't become available until July 1st, so we really haven't done anything other than what was mentioned at the previous meeting, which is some initial discussion with landowners, the key landowners in that area.
Chapter 61 and all of that stuff.
Right. So with regard to Gorman, we feel that there's a way to reach out to them. There are folks who are very familiar with reaching out to landowners, much more so, with much more experience than I or anyone else on this committee has personally. And so we hope to avail ourselves of their knowledge to do that, to find out a way to ideally make that work for everybody. I would point out that with the two landowners that are already willing to work with us, there is a route through town-owned land. It would cross Daniel Road. I met with the abutters there, the neighbors there. They do not want that approach. And so at this point, I have told them that I personally will not pursue that route. But that is a route that is available to us as a backup. It would take more discussion with the neighbors, but it's there. It does not require the Gorman property. So there's alternatives to the alternatives. And we're going to continue to work on that. No, I think no comment at this point. Bob, public comment? Did you have anything else? You raised your hand.
Right, I guess.
Yeah, go to the mic, please.
You've pretty much addressed what was going to be simply a question, which was the availability of the monies from the CPC grant for the Western Route Alignment feasibility study. You can't even access that until July 1, and you do need this agreement from these three different landowners, I guess, to proceed to use that money. Is that correct?
No, we need, we have approval from the two landowners, the Colella family and Mr. Churko, to do the work on their land at this point, and that's what the money that we applied for was for. So, and I should add, those two parcels are the ones that are perhaps most complicated in terms of the amount of wetlands, and they're looking to use their land and do things on their land. So figuring out how a trail would work within those properties. So those are the more complicated pieces. There's also on the eastern side, on town land, some work required with wetlands issues on that side.
Okay, so so you can spend the CPC money on projects on those properties even without the cooperation of the third property, are you telling me that?
Correct.
Because the article from the town meeting I'm reading says that the TCMC gets written statement from private property owners for permission to walk the site, determine wetlands, and survey the land for future trail locations, and expressing willingness to enter into discussions on the town purchasing an easement for the future trail. So I presume that you needed all three for your grant, but you're telling me you don't?
Correct. The grant was specifically for the two that we had permission from.
Well, then I guess that's good news for being able to use at least some of those monies.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's my, that continues to be my interest, is how that Western Alignment feasibility study is going. And so, thank you for that.
Thanks. All right.
1 second. Jane, if you have that in electronic copy, can you send me a copy of your statement? That would be great, thank you. I'll attach it.
Okay. Any other public comments? Seeing none, moving on to the minutes. Did everyone have a chance to look at the fairly voluminous minutes from the last meeting?
I did, and I'm awed at whoever put them together.
Linda?
I just used the transcript because so much was said and I
It
didn't
was.
want to mess up anyone's
Yeah.
words.
No,
So
that was-
much more than usual,
Yeah, yes.
only for that
Yeah.
reason.
No, I think it was
lengthy, thank you.
Yeah, you won't
Yeah.
need that, you won't see that again, I hope.
Okay. Any comments on the minutes? Okay. Seeing none, looking for a motion to approve.
Move that we approve the minutes of the 6/14/23 meeting as drafted.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. There are only folks here, so we can signify by raising your hand and saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous, and so carries. I assume that's the case.
Can I was the only one here last time, but can I ask, just for the completeness of record, to have that emailed to me so I can put it in, because we did post a meeting, I'll say that we didn't have a quorum, but they're attached.
Okay.
Thank
Yes, we
you.
can certainly do that.
That's much appreciated.
I'll do that, Peter.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on. Item 2, review of the hike for the kids that was held this past weekend. The two of you were on it. I bowed out, and Chris Ann as well. I bowed out to make sure we didn't have a quorum. Not that we were likely to discuss anything, but thought it best, given the current temperature, to do that. So, Linda, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, it was disappointing. It was great because Chris Ann and her kid were there, but that was it. And Chuck and I, and
You got one other.
Ken Parker.
and Ken came.
Yep.
So it was a really wonderful time between us, and Chris Ann's daughter is so delightful. And then at some point, someone from Mendon showed up. Somehow he heard about it and came with his kid, which was great. He heard about it through Kangaroo Kids, so someone posted there. So I'm not sure. We talked on the walk, Chris Ann and I, about what we can do to have more people participate, and
Probably not having it on the Timlin race day was probably.
And I think the weather forecast was
Yeah.
threatening, and I think that may have scared some although the weather turned out okay. for
Yeah.
us.
End of school year is also.
Yeah.
It was a busy weekend in general, but I think there's more to it than that. We're gonna try to really work with one or two kids-oriented groups at a time. And we tried that a little bit this time, but not enough, so I think Chris Ann is gonna focus on this. This time we tried working with the library and YMCA because they said they were very interested, but then they didn't participate. So she's gonna just pick a group or two and really push it with them. And if we focus on one group and getting a bunch of people from that group for one walk, and it's open to everyone.
Right.
But in terms of trying to get people to turn out, we're thinking that way might be better. Just because targeted outreach will probably yield more people than generic blasts. So, yeah, it was unfortunate that we didn't get many people, and the weather hurt, but wasn't the only reason.
Okay. Thoughts from anyone else?
Only thanks to Linda for her effort in setting it up. Just a recommendation for folks with younger kids, the trail behind the center school is a fun spot. Good
Yeah.
rocks to climb, streams to play in, so.
The two young kids and even the older kids like us
Yeah.
had fun.
Yeah, yeah.
And Chris Ann and I are going to talk about where we want to do the next one. So at the next meeting, hopefully we'll report back on that.
Yeah. With regard to behind center school, I think Nathan finally got down there. Nathan is a volunteer with a young child, but also with lots of experience on building trails in the White Mountains. And there's a particular rock trail with cave and all sorts of other things that would be great for kids, but we need someone who's more of a professional to figure out how the trail winds its way up the rocks. But I think that once that goes in, that'll be another great feature for kids in that area. Okay, moving on. Item 3, Trails Committee charge. And this is to review the draft charge and discuss modifications. I did provide a copy to these folks. Did the select board members get a chance to look at that? Probably not, because you wouldn't have had it.
It came out at 4 this afternoon.
Yeah.
I do have it on the screen. I don't know that
Yeah.
it's going to be big enough
Can
to.
you email it? We both have our computers.
Oh, good point.
Magic of
email?
electronics.
I can
Fran, it
forward
came
the
at
email
4.
from
Don't tell me you
earlier.
haven't reviewed
Yeah, if you
it
could
yet.
forward the email, that would be great.
Oh, here, we can,
As I say, I was planning on printing another copy, but I had that
Copy, and they
paper
can-
issue.
We just got a lecture from the Green Committee at our meeting last night, not printed, no printer. Not
Right.
necessary.
A lecture.
No.
Oh, just teasing. A handout we got, right? Or a proposed handout that we're gonna give paper format to,
I am not sure I still have it in my box to send. Let me see.
well, we can share the one, Fran passed one over, we can share.
Oh,
got-
do you have one?
I think Chuck and I have one.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Killed trees.
Updated charge. I got it.
Okay.
All right, 1 second.
So if you recall from last week's meeting, Janine had put together basically a one-pager, and then the charge that the select board had put together back in 2019
19.
yeah.
was a 3-pager, so trying to shoehorn them in, and spent a fair bit of time kind of thinking about what the key issues were. So I put together a version that kind of combined some of the thoughts that Janine had with what was already in there. The key purpose, I think,
2019.
still comes down to, promoting the development and sustainability of town trails, encourage the public use of the trails,
Oh, sure.
and then coordinate with other boards and committees.
If you want me to email this to you,
And
right
residents.
now, the
Residents.
agenda for the
Yes.
church, can you just,
Yeah.
because it's not coming up on my remembered names, thanks.
Here, I'll print up.
And is this part of the original purpose that was put forth back in 2019? Or is it a modification of that?
It's a modification of that.
There it is.
And then the goal here is to review it with this body
Is there a file out there?
and then
Yeah.
Oh,
ultimately
yeah,
have
definitely
it
send it to her.
reviewed and approved
Is
by
Shahadul on
the
this?
select board.
Yeah. And it's something that we took a shot at 6 months ago, recognizing that there were some issues. You know, but
Excellent.
we took a shot at it and then got busy doing other things, and so this is a good time to kind of really
Okay.
look at it
Yeah, I
in
don't see
detail.
shadows, but that's okay.
Okay.
Oh, there it is. Boom, thank you.
I mean, from, Chair, my, having gone through and made comments on the original version, and then looking at Janine's very short, compressed version, I think this version, and this is sort of the second round of your condensation of the old, taking the approach of Janine's, I think this works pretty well in capturing the intent of the original, but fitting it to the experience we've had in the last 4 years, and what we've found now really makes sense for us to be doing. Also, your suggestions include some little different in the membership, which I also concur with. I think that'll make us work better in the long run as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So for the folks watching at home and in the audience, the original charge had the committee, I think 4 at-large members, and then members appointed by the Conservation Commission, Planning Board, and Parks and Rec.
Right.
And the issue that we get into is that people get stretched too thin. It's hard to be a planning board member, go to 2 meetings a month, a site walk, what have you. And we feel it's probably better to have folks who are really focused on trails, have that as their primary responsibility. That way they're more likely to be focusing on the work that we need to do. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So that was our thought on that. Having said that, I think the other thing is that the interaction between the Upper Charles Trail Committee and our committee, when we were originally formed, there's actually a paragraph that basically says we shall have no involvement in what other folks are doing. And I think that particularly with regard to the Upper Charles Trail was perhaps not such a good idea. I think there's ways to allow some interaction. My suggestion here is that there are going to be key milestones of the Upper Charles Trail. And again, my original, as expressed I think last week, my original thought was that it was our committee and a subcommittee of that. As Mrs. Kramer pointed out, and I was planning that modeled on the school building committee, but the school building committee, as Mrs. Kramer pointed out, is actually a select board appointed committee, even though it has 2 school committee members on it. Somebody that I spoke with suggested that perhaps it was more design review to planning board is the thought, but I think it's almost really, it got me thinking today on a fairly long run that really what's key is how those interact and when those committees interact. And the key is for milestones with regard to the Upper Charles Trail. And the idea here, and certainly really open to suggestions, this is Mrs. Kramer said when she put her proposal out half a month ago, and it's out there for people to throw rocks at, was that with regard to those milestones, the two committees meet and vote on, what the trail surface is going to be, what the route of the trail is going to be, and other key milestones can be established kind of as we go along, both by the select board as well as by the committees working together. One thought I had was that on each of those milestones, it would move forward, require a vote of 2/3 of the combined committees to move forward. That precludes anyone trying to pack a group and overload how things work.
And just a question through the chair, on those votes, is that a binding vote, or are these recommendations that would be ultimately reviewed and approved by the select board?
Everything would be approved by the select board. So the idea is, yes, these are the committees getting together, coming up with, voting on something, coming up with a recommendation that then goes to the select board. The sort of genesis for this was thinking about some of the issues that have occurred in the past, in particular with regard to funding. At one point, several years ago, both the Upper Charles Trail Committee and our committee went for funding through the state. It was pretty clear to me that the state was only going to award one grant to the town of Hopkinton. And in the debrief from the state, when they in fact did award one grant, that's exactly what happened. And in talking to the DCR representative, what she indicated was that Hopkinton was going to get only one grant, and that the grant that said regional on it was going to get that money, even though from the town of Hopkinton, I would argue that that may have not been the best priority. So the idea is to try and figure out priority among trail knowledgeable folks and then bring that to the select board so that the priorities are understood. Doesn't mean the select board can't reorder priorities, but at least they've had input from folks who have been down in the weeds working on this stuff. So, as far as the various charges, we, obviously spend time on public involvement and engagement, working with the Upper Charles Trail Committee, as I just mentioned. We want to promote and work with other neighboring towns as well. The idea that both here, but then also going forward, the Upper Charles Trail, when it's complete, will then be turned over to us, and so it would be the Trails Committee's charge to interact with neighborhoods. I know, for example, there's a trail coming in ideally from Westboro through Southboro at some point. That's not in the Upper Charles Trail Committee's charge to look at that, but that's something that obviously Hopkinton needs to keep an eye on.
So one question is, and maybe this is covered by the UCTC group or this group, but is there a responsibility for an overall strategy or approach to the trails at an aggregate level that aligns with the town's master plan, also the growth study, and is that something that would be shared then back, or should be shared back with not only the select board but also the planning board? I didn't see anything, and maybe that's already covered, or maybe that's not even as part of. Because one of the things I think of with this group, and I've heard people's thought on it, is, what is the vision, right? What is the 10,000 foot view, and is that then shared with the select board? Because I think they operate at 10,000 feet in many cases, and I think they're the overseer of all. I think our charge, or one of the elements of the charge, should be to have that strategic plan provided on an annual basis or a semi-annual basis, probably annual basis, to the select board. But I'm open to thoughts and suggestions on that as well.
No, one of the things, and it's discussed under coordination with other town boards and committees, is that we are the umbrella trail
That's
organization.
different than a strategy.
Right,
It's
no,
different than-
and
I
to
just
your-
don't see it.
Okay, to your point, no, the strategy is not discussed, the vision is not
Shouldn't be.
discussed, so, and
I
they
guess it
should be.
should be.
Correct.
Then-
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Having said that,
I
I
would
think,
concur too, just to
Yeah.
weigh in. I think that's a really useful thing.
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
Does the, I mean, I'm sorry to
go
interrupt.
ahead.
Does the select board feel the same way?
I have to admit, I'm a little bit lost because the two documents, it's hard to see what was removed and added. I agree that this first one is too long. So I'm having a little trouble following along what the changes are compared to what you do now.
In terms of overall strategy, though, a master plan, it becomes imperative, right? This is a big undertaking with lots of little pieces and moving parts. So I appreciate that comment a lot, and think that, we really not only have to have sort of a global vision, but also we have to have a working relationship with some enthusiastic buy-in, because we're going to end up hitting bumps always, and we have to have a way that people with divergent opinions work it through and work together, right? So some mechanism for that.
I would agree, but I also think that there should be a unified North Star. right?
I totally agree. Like, what is the picture on the puzzle box? Even though we know not every trail and the picture isn't fixed, but what is it we're all aiming at?
Agree.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I clarify, are you talking about the Upper Trails Trail or versus all the trails in town?
So
The overall trails committee.
The overall.
So right now we're talking about the trail.
an overall trails approach, but I do think that I could appreciate that, regular running, walking trails could have a North Star, and an Upper Charles Trail could have a North Star, right? We could have, there are different kinds of trails if we have two different kinds of trails.
I personally think we should have one plan that incorporates both of them.
Yeah,
Because there will be overlap between portions of the
Of
trails.
course, of course.
And they're trails. We've come up with some dichotomy of labeling them for the sake of committees and boards, but they're trails.
So I don't know how it all begins, the dichotomy of naming them. In my head, and I could be wrong, in my head they sort of are different kinds of trails, both of which I enjoy a lot. And I understand that, like Center Trail, right, now has trails off of it, which is awesome, right? That'd be great. But if you drop a little spider web of trails on Fruit Street that don't connect to the Center Trail or any other big network of trail, that's also awesome.
Yeah, I think Chair, there has been some discussion about looking at even the Upper Charles Trail as a series of separate segments that might be developed separately, and so part of the rationale on that is make sure that those segments do perhaps serve a local neighborhood purpose as well as being potentially part of a through route. So I think there needs to be some connection and there as well.
I don't have any reason to disagree with that, right? And I know that you're a trails expert, so I appreciate that a lot. But I just, so maybe we're talking about different things like community visioning and, more down and in the work of it, how trails are actually put together and how they connect and the ways that it makes sense to visualize that connectivity.
Yeah, and again, we're not kind of doing this in a vacuum, so Lexington with their Across Lexington program, and I know Wellesley has something similar, there are models we can look at, to combine the networks and do some of the connectivity that the planning board connectivity study encouraged. So that's the idea. the Upper Charles Trail I see as being sort of, a new school, if you will, a new trail, and it's certainly different than most of the others, but not all of the other trails in town, in terms of, that while these smaller pedestrian-type trails don't need to be handicap accessible, the Upper Charles Trail should be.
Does. Yes.
So it's a different beast, but it's sort of the high end of something. But it's at the end of the day, it's just one slightly different trail from the rest of the trails in town. To the point, then I think having a vision statement would be great, and then having this sort of overarching mandate.
I also think some shared across all committees nomenclature. What is it we're talking about? What makes them different, and how do they function? And it would be really helpful, because I don't think we need to get caught up and trip up over miscommunications in that regard. Like, let's just know what we're talking about and what we're aiming at, and whether or not there's this is just me, right? I don't have a vote of my committee either, but whether or not we have an overarching global trails vision or two compatible visions, I don't have a strong opinion on. But a picture of what it is we're aiming at with the different kinds of trails that we're talking about certainly makes sense to me.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to add that we already work with other trail groups. We work with Sudbury Valley Trails. We work with Halt Trails. We have quite an extensive network of state trails in Hopkinton. So the overall plan, while we don't have control over most of those trails I just mentioned, it sure should take them into account. We don't want to be building a new trail right next to a perfectly good existing trail, for example. So the master plan should at least consider the trails that we do have responsibility for more, but also the trails that exist that we don't.
It's a really good point. And different kinds of trails. I'm sure that there's an extensive trail network for horse riders, right? What are, considering all kinds of trails.
And I mean, at some level, we certainly are considering all those things, but having it down on paper makes sense. So for example, one of the things that we consider in looking at the various trail networks, is trying to make sure that each corner of the town, if you will, is served by trails. And we look at that and, factor that in when we're looking at moving forward on prioritizing a particular area to try and upgrade the network that's there. That should be prioritized. One of the other things to sort of get at that I've added here that I think makes sense for not just our committee, but perhaps other committees as well, is to put down a list of annual tasks. So here, 2024 tasks, the last page there. And that's something that we would think through right around the time of coming up to town meeting, because obviously some of that work is going to be dependent on how town meeting vote goes. But then bring that to you folks and say, hey, this is, as you would in a business. Hey, here's my goals for the year. What do you think? And recognizing that things may change, I've added sort of the last paragraph that basically says we understand things may change and priorities, other things may come up. But I think it makes sense, and something we haven't done, and I don't think it's been done by many committees, is to try and lay out priorities.
Can I just suggest you leave dogs out of it?
No, actually, that's actually on our list.
I know, I see it, and I'm like, I'm being a tiny bit facetious.
Yeah. Well, the reason is that the fun we all had at town meeting discussing dogs, and we had actually had a meeting before that where we kind of ran through the same thing. You have people who have been fearful of dogs such that they won't use the trails from age 5 when they were bitten and attacked by a dog.
Right.
And you've got really great dog owners they still are afraid. Those people who have been bitten may still be afraid of those folks. And then you've got people who just want their dogs to be off leash. And everybody's got good points.
Correct.
And so we characterize it as needing a campaign to address the issue. It's not a, I think, simple fix, which is kind of what was tried at town meeting and then spectacularly did not work.
Yeah.
So our approach is to, because we think that this really is something that is if anybody's problem, more our problem than other folks, is something that we were going to present to you, that we'll take that on. So that's why it's kind of listed here.
I'd like to add on, I'd like to summarize what Peter said, or maybe add an important, or say it more sharply. People aren't using trails because of people who don't have their dogs on the trails. So
Right.
that's a problem.
No,
for
I
us.
totally get
We're
it.
building
And it's a problem
trails,
for me too.
And they can't use them. So that's not right, because it's not legal either. So that's one part of it. The second part is, I think, Peter, we should be one of several groups that work on it. I was gonna, when we talked about this tonight, I was gonna say, I don't know that we should own this, but I think we could own getting a bunch of
We can
people
own
together
leadership
to
of it.
drive it.
Yeah.
Because it goes beyond us. It's
Right.
in the streets too, but our focus would be on the trails part.
Just a clarification question, is that a charge that the select board wants this group to oversee
So
or
just
work
to
on?
clarify,
Dogs?
the town meeting vote was only about whether dogs could be off leash at night or not. Dogs already are not supposed to be off leash in the daytime
Right.
on the trails, even though I know they are.
That's the issue.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Right.
So signage, I mean,
Go ahead.
I don't think this falls under our purview at all.
Well,
signage,
it
you could
does
put
in
up
that
signage.
people aren't using the
You
trails.
can put up signage, but it's not, I don't,
Well, we have a whole, we've talked a lot, we have some ideas of things we want to do. I just think we should be only one of the groups addressing it.
Who owns
I
it?
don't think we should own it. I don't know. We haven't gotten to that yet. It's on our agenda.
We're all gonna be not me, is what we're gonna be.
not my backyard.
That's what we're gonna be. We're gonna be not me, because it unnecessarily complicates it, because nobody can agree. Listen, I've heard people go bananas over horses using the trail, and heaven forbid there was horse manure. Now, in my opinion, I'm like,
Yeah.
who cares, right? Step around, step lively, folks, you know?
Well, but
Right, and I love that horses might be out there. Dogs too, right? I have a certain comfort with dogs and a certain discomfort with dogs. Everybody has their own comfort zone with it.
right, but are there ways, if you look at this as a campaign, and to Fran's point, it's ours because the dogs are using the trails and our users are using the trails. And the other thing was that some of our original charge, if you remember looking at it, was, for example, to discuss with the select board what to do about open space. Is that our charge? Absolutely not. But we were assigned that. So I think we can take something like this on because, and be the lead on it. And because in some ways we've been thinking about it perhaps more than others because it is such a big issue for us.
I encourage you to keep this conversation going as a committee, right? You have your own focus and so forth. My first inclination is to say, don't make it part of your charge or your goals. Have a
No.
campaign. Have a campaign.
But that's
that
where we would
includes
have it as a
education.
2024 goal. And the idea would be to reach out to others, hold public forums. So rather than have the select board hold public forums,
Yeah, no, right.
we can take the lead on that. Because I think at the end of the day, we're not going to make everybody happy, but people will be happier knowing that it's been looked at. And there may be some fixes. So, for
There may be.
example, hunting season. A lot of people are concerned about hunting season. A lot of people don't know that Sunday there's no hunting. Can we perhaps put a day that, you've got to be really strict, or you can't walk your dog on Sunday on the Cameron Woods property, and we have signage to that effect, so that if you're somebody who is deathly afraid of dogs, you know that there may be one, maybe two safe days. At least try it. At least offer that and see
I hate
to the public and say,
I hate
do you
to be
agree
a
or not?
naysayer, I do, because I like ideas, whatever, and I would love people to have sort of, I guess maybe a couple of trails if that was such a thing that were dog-free,
Yeah.
right? But to sort of like we already have a problem with dogs. It's already a rule that you're not supposed to have your dog off lead. And, and we don't really want to get into the business of enforcing a whole bunch of, little rules.
Right, no, that's the thing, to try to do
Right?
it as a
I definitely want
to get too much into the
yeah.
weeds on this.
Yeah,
I guess in
yeah.
this last page 4, is not really part of the charge. It's like a
No, that's not part of the charge.
separate, yeah.
Jane, you've been waiting patiently.
Yeah, Jane had a comment.
And we should ask Irfan too.
You might want to look at surrounding towns and then some other towns that tackle this problem.
Oh, people
sorry.
can't hear you. Yeah.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
I was just going to suggest you might want to take a look at how other towns handle this. We're not the first town to.
Or
Yes,
the
and we
second or the
have.
third.
We do have this as an agenda item. We have looked a little bit at what other towns, so it's a great point, and we have been doing
Right.
that.
I know that many towns work off of the existing law that's already in effect, and they have relied on private citizens or groups to notify of an offender to the town clerk's office. And that way it's kind of low-key, and there can be fines set up additionally. And that's a good way of handling it so that it's not so public, and there can be ways to handle this problem.
Right. Thanks, Ben. Alrighty, anyway, more comments on the charge.
Should we see Irfan's on the Zoom in case he had any?
Oh,
We're fine.
Irfan, do you have any thoughts on the charge?
Oh, to show you doing anything too? He might not be there. I can't read it from here. Shahidul, do you have any comments?
I do.
No, still processing it. Thank you. I don't have any comments right now.
It's hard to hear.
We can't hear you.
You need to put him out on the speakers.
Let me try it again.
That's a little better.
There you go.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I was just saying, very interesting discussion, and I'm still processing it, so I'll hold off my comments for now.
Okay, thank you. Alrighty. Any other comments on the charge? So we need a vision, master planning. Obviously, this was put up as a straw person, so.
Yeah, so I would help me to kind of walk through what has changed, if that's okay. Like, so I see you removed the vision theme, right? There's a part on that.
I kept that. There was a second,
Well, there were two.
right.
Yeah. Was it just?
Some of that seemed somewhat redundant.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it changed from section 3.1 of the charter to section 6.1.
Right.
Did the
I
charter
think
change?
6.1 is actually correct.
Okay.
Basically 6.1 is discussing appointments of boards and committees. And as I understand it from having spent some time looking at it, 6.1B allows the town manager actually establishes boards and committees with the approval of the select board.
Okay, so that's a correction.
So I think that's a correction. Obviously, that's not going final without, because one version for Upper Charles it said 3.2 and for ours it said 3.1 or vice versa. I mean, it was sort of like they're citing the wrong things. So I think this is correct.
Okay.
I think on this, you didn't by chance do track changes. I think that's kind of what you would do.
Yeah, because I'm just trying to know.
We can do that afterwards and send that if it makes it easier
I
to
think it would be,
compare.
yeah.
I think you'll see there are a lot of changes though, so it might not
This is-
really
Right.
help.
Right. The idea was to condense that 3-page document with 11
get
charges
that,
down to
which is
a
good.
short.
It does help, though, to see the changes. It really does.
Right, well, and what I can do is on each of the charges say what it got rolled into, because a good number of these were rolled into more general.
Yeah, you can delete it, just put it in the comment section,
Yeah,
I think.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
because in the new one, there's a section called responsibilities that wasn't in the old one, but.
Correct.
Okay.
Right, and we added, as charged. The big add from our perspective is actually developing and maintaining trails. And as Linda pointed out, though, our goal there is not, even though what happens is that we physically go do that, some of us, our goal is not to be the folks who are physically doing that, but we're directing folks to do that.
Okay.
But having said that, somebody needs to actually be developing, guiding the trails. And that wasn't in the original charge. There was, so like one of the things, for example, that's a change is we were tasked in the original charge with developing a way to interact with the abutters because that was one of the key issues. We've got those procedures in place, so now the issue is it's changed to develop the guidelines to an implementation phase.
Okay, and I see you added that when the Alcatraz trial would be complete, that it would be turned over to this committee for maintenance.
Right.
Okay. Let's see. And the composition still 7, right? Okay, 7 members.
But at large,
But
as
all at large.
opposed to.
All at large, yes.
Okay, but one must be a member of the Alcatraz Trail. Or so this committee would pick a person from
Correct.
their committee to be on the Alcatraz
Right.
Trail.
And
then
again,
six
one, I just threw that number out just to not make it too tasking, but 1 or 2, we might want to allow some flexibility on there. I think it's important to have the 2 committees working, that somebody is very aware of what both are doing.
Yeah.
But again, don't want to strap somebody with basically meeting every Wednesday night or something like that
Okay.
either.
And the clause about no member may serve more than 3 consecutive terms was in the last charge
Correct.
too. That's not
Correct. And I think term limits are probably a good idea, again, not just for our committee, but going forward.
This is sort of tangential, but while we're here, the paragraph right after that, members are expected to have blah, 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 past experience. I have not seen how the select board, when you guys appoint people, I don't see how you're ever reviewing or enforcing that.
So it really varies by committee.
Oh, okay.
What was the paragraph?
Yeah, I noticed that was different.
Do you want me
too.
to
So
read it out loud? Members are expected to have an interest and experience in the use of trails, ideally of various types. Members may be members of other committees, but ideally will have Trails Committee efforts as their primary town charge. Past experience on other town committees, boards, or commissions, and relevant professional experience shall also be considered in selecting members. And my point was, I have been to a few select board meetings where people are appointed who, the people appointed don't seem to match what the committee wants. So I don't know how that happens.
So like, I'm on the Historic District Commission, and that is super specific by the state law and the bylaw. Like, so there has to be someone recommended by the Board of Realtors. So we definitely we appoint someone that's a realtor. There has to be an architect, and we appoint someone that's an architect. There has to be a resident of the district.
So how are you checking those things, though, and when?
So we get a letter from the Board of Realtors. So if there's a realtor that wants to do it, they write to the Board of Realtors and they get a recommendation. Same thing with the board. I think it's called the Boston Society of Architects. And then the resident of the district, we check that they live in the district.
So how would we do it here, for example?
Well, so this is a little more vague. It's not
Yeah.
so specific. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the idea here is that we want folks who are interested in trails, and that's really the primary thing that we're looking for, the primary characteristic.
Yeah.
Having said that, if you've got 2 people, one of whom has, education or professional experience that is, very tangential, and you've got somebody else who perhaps is a civil engineer and you're going to be doing a lot of trail building, you might go for the civil engineer. The idea is to provide some way for you folks to kind of winnow down who's
hear-
best. Having said that,
I hear and understand that,
it's
but sometimes
very
nobody applies with
subjective.
exactly those qualifications.
But I just don't even know what the process is for you guys to look and see if there's a match.
Well, you would line it up then, so one person must have civil architecture experience, one person must
That's
have.
what I'm trying to avoid. I
Yeah.
think the
Right.
primary
It's big
thing
like
is
this.
trail,
Right.
you know, if they've got a list of, they've hiked trails across the United States, that should be a priority for our needs. And the fact that they're a civil engineer or have some other building experience, I think is less important in this instance.
But I
So
think
there's a
I'm
balance,
still
I
a
think.
little confused. If you had a select board meeting tomorrow night and somebody was up for the Trails Committee, would you actually open up the charge and look at what the requirements are or what the guidance is and then go compare that to the
If there
candidates?
Yeah,
is,
it's usually in our packet.
if there is directed guidance, the staff does look at that
So like.
before so it's in
And it's
there.
in the packet. Like, so last night we did Historic District Commission again.
Right.
And one was a representative of the Historical Society, so they had to have a letter in their packet that the Historical Society had recommended them.
Yep.
And the other two that we happened to appoint were at large, but had it been the architect, they would have a letter from the Board of Architects.
So when we have an open position on trails, we would tell you what, we at that point would say, here are the things you should be looking for?
Well, no, it's in the
No,
charge.
it shows.
It's in the
Charge,
charge.
do you look at the charge before?
Yes, it
The
would
town
show up
staff-
in their
The
packet.
town staff puts it in the packet and
The
says you
charge is in the packet, okay.
Or
Well, like, we have-
those qualifications.
Not
should
the
be in their
whole
packet.
charge,
Yeah.
just to be
But just the
clear.
appointing
Qualifications.
requirements.
Right.
Got
So,
it.
like, we did Woodville Historic District too, and there was one that was a resident of a district, one that was at large. No, one was a realtor, one realtor, one
Okay.
from the district. And it said that in our packet.
Got it. Thank you. That,
Yeah, and so one of the things I'm trying to get away with is that people like me paper really well and probably can get, you know, I've been on planning board, I've been on all these committees. You know, we want new blood, and that's been one of our focuses, is trying to get folks in. As you know, one of the things Chuck Joseph talks about is as some of us get a little older, we're building these trails for folks coming after us who frankly oftentimes are, you know, Chris Ann is off, does a great job of showing up our meetings. This is the last day of school, and she's got last day of school things with her kids.
Yeah.
But those are the users we're trying to get at and get their involvement. So not the folks
Yeah.
who have a lot of, you know,
So I don't
paper experience.
have any objection to it being worded this way, but because it's kind of vague and doesn't say one member this, one member that, it's subjective who we might choose. You know,
Correct. Yeah, which-
and
that's
then-
okay.
So say
Yeah.
we got 7 applicants that didn't have any of these skills, but we're really we're interested for some other reason.
You guys can recognize
And
which one
nobody else-
seems the most interested in trails. Is sort
Yeah.
of what we're asking.
But sometimes we get people that I don't know, they maybe don't fit at all, but nobody else applies too, and then they would probably get
They,
pointed.
they get it then. But
Yeah.
Right.
you know what I'm saying. If you got 7 people and we're looking to fill 2 positions and 2 of them have hiked trails all over and say, oh yeah, I worked on, you know, when I was in such and such a town. I mean, this guy that I was talking about earlier, Nate, where he's built trails in the White Mountains. He brings a level of knowledge and understanding of trails and what trail signs look like because that's a huge interest of his.
Yeah.
Right.
And in our packet, we do
That's
get
what we're
everybody's
looking
resume too, so, or in their interest
Right.
letter. So we do see that if they list trails.
Resumes don't always line up, obviously,
Right.
right? And, because you can have a guy that's, you know, a person who's big in finance, but has also hiked all over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to say, my husband keeps telling me that the Appalachian Trail was put together in, it was a,
Yep.
what's that?
In segments.
And fast,
Oh, and fast?
fast,
Yeah.
fast. Yep. So really, we ought to be able,
Yeah. East Coast Greenway
yep.
going on the same way.
Yeah, okay. I'm
thank
gonna,
you, that was
Anyway, we're
really
diving.
helpful.
Yeah.
To understand.
Okay, anything else on Trails Committee charge at this point? Any other key things? And obviously, as you have thoughts, and that goes for everybody, including the public out there, feel free to
Yeah.
send me that information or thoughts on
So
things.
just to re-clarify here,
Yep.
so anyways, you used to have 4 members at large and 3 that were recommended by different committees.
Correct.
Now, we all at large except 1 member. This committee would be on the Upper Trails Trail.
Right.
Okay. And then,
But then
This
there
is
is
a-
provision for liaisons.
what's that?
There is provision for
There-
No,
liaisons.
there's no.
Not in this new one, I
Right.
don't think.
It's
No,
this
the way it
reverse.
works is people
so wait.
from this committee will be
Yeah.
assigned
Okay.
to, so somebody will be in charge of alerting the planning board.
Yep.
Concom, open space, I'm not sure if I put open space in actually, but it should
Yeah, you
be.
did.
Yep.
Halt, Trails Club, and their goal, their job would be to go to at least 2 of their meetings, so semi-annually attend their meetings.
Okay, so these would be
Say what we're up
non-voting
to.
liaisons. Okay.
And then also that would be the point of contact, so if the chair of that organization ran into an issue, so planning board has a new development coming in and they think trails make sense there, they would reach out to their liaison to attend their meetings perhaps related to that development.
Okay.
2 a year could be a lot. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. If we have 7 members, then 2 a year works. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, I don't think I have any other questions right now, do you?
I don't right now, no.
And I
Okay.
don't know if you wanted to do the tasks at all, or are we just, that's just sort of a hint?
That's a hint, I think
Because I think.
it's something that makes sense for, as a general rule, for committees to present to the select board. One of the issues that we've heard is that, the select board, I mean, we haven't spoken to you basically since we were put in place, other than, coming to you.
We came
what-
a couple months ago, I think.
Right,
Yeah.
right, but that was what, 3 years after we started?
Okay.
And you have really not much idea what we were doing, and as the town, leading committee, you ought to know. Somebody comes to you and says, hey, what's the trail committee up to? You ought to be able to say, well, they've got some goals, and here's, without having to reach out.
Yeah, here's the thing, I agree. And also, there is a certain value and expectation that all committees are independent organizations, and people don't actually want too much oversight either, right? So there's a give and take. So I think if there are committees out there, I happen to be your liaison, I think again.
You are.
So, I know I am this time, and I just did it, so I should know this information, but,
You're on the new list, too.
yeah, I am, and I was last time.
Here it is,
But,
proposed assignment.
so I think that, to your point that liaisons and so forth, I don't think there really is an expectation that people come every time. Like I'm a new liaison to the Housing Authority. For obvious reasons, I went a couple of times just to make sure that they know who I am and if there is a way that I can be helpful. And the same is true here, right? But also reach out, right? If for some reason your liaison, me in this case for you, but if it isn't at your meetings and you feel like you need to have that conversation, make sure you let people know.
Right.
Because we want to keep that connection, but we also all of us have a lot of meetings and a lot of obligations, right? So it's really, it's a conversational thing. Just let people know. And, for example, like I was just looking at my liaison list too, right? And I've got the school committee. And I'm thinking to myself, I keep pretty close tabs on the school committee, but I don't go to their meetings very often. So I might have to go a couple of times just so, they know that I'm actually paying attention.
Do you guys like that we would send minutes and agendas to liaisons, or it's too much?
Too much.
Yeah, I don't think that you have to do that. Now, minutes, you guys are sending minutes to the town at every time they're approved, right?
Yeah, and I haven't double-checked to see whether Connor has actually found a space for us yet. Because
Okay.
the
All
trail
our
committee
minutes-
was not one of the listed
It's
committees.
not a drop down.
All
Okay.
of them are in
Okay.
Google Docs under our Google Doc folder, but they're
Right.
just the ones I put there after the meeting and after.
Yeah,
they're
no,
approved.
it's just, somebody asked the question and suggested that not all boards and committees get the minutes in, which is why Elaine sent the thing out.
Yeah, I don't think we do on sustainability, because I don't think we
They need
do
to.
it.
They just need to. And in Connor or IT's responsibility, we'll have to figure out the irony. The great irony here is that they go to the town and they drop into the most non-searchable situation. And that continues to be a priority, because honestly, people need to be able to search minutes and find them easily, whether they're looking for them at 2 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's none of our business when they want to see what's on the minutes, right?
Yeah, I click sustainable green, nothing pops up.
Yeah, so they need to go in.
I'm sorry, what's that?
We're looking at the database that they have there, and I click Sustainable Green Committee, nothing comes up.
See, and we have a Google Drive folder on the town Google Drive where there's a subfolder that says minutes for both trails and.
But it should be on the town's.
Right, and we.
Yeah. Oh no, here's some popped up, some older ones from 2014. Okay.
So the search feature currently is not great, and that continues to be a priority, and it is being worked on,
They're
right? The
purchasing
town
a new
website,
system.
yeah. But they do need to get to town hall.
Right.
Okay.
And town hall staff does need to know how to navigate to get to them if somebody asks.
And
right?
that's to Connor. They should be.
Connor or IT, but Connor is fine.
I think Elaine said there's a generic address, townclerk@hopkinton.ma.gov, that goes to him and his assistant.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
whoever's in that day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. They just need to get to town hall, and you know, hopefully very soon they'll actually be searchable in a way that is intuitive and makes sense and is easy. I'm sorry, I lost track of the. We don't need to get them by email.
Yeah.
Unless there's some specific thing you want. What? Sure.
I was going to say, I was the liaison to the library, and they used to always send me their minutes.
And you loved it.
Well, I didn't always look at them, but when I had a question,
Yeah.
I could look at them.
Yeah.
So I don't mind getting more emails.
Yeah.
So it could be up to the discretion of the liaison.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to send them.
Yeah, so
If you're willing,
one more thing to talk, or to mention on the Trails Committee charge, item 4 of the 2024 tasks, that is 2 of the charges, because Chuck's comment as a former wetland professional was that both of those, which is, one was like our number 1 charge and the other was our, number 8.
Are you talking about the old one, the old charge?
Yes, the old charge.
Old charge number 2.
Those were things that were typically done by consultants.
Yep.
And, require a lot of detail. I mean, one person could sit down and spend just a ton of time doing that. We've done the groundwork to see what would work in terms of signs and what would work for some of this stuff, but in terms of putting a report together, while that's something we can do, I look at that more as a task that, at some point, now that we've worked on trails for a while and have an idea what works and what doesn't work, it'd be good to get that laid out as a guidance document, but that's something that we would be contracting out, not doing in-house.
Yeah, and I would say just in terms of the example of such as, signs or, boardwalk dimensions or something like that, those we've developed over the past, 2 or 3 years, working with the other trail-related groups, the HALT and the Trails Club and Open Space, to come up with something that seems to work for everybody. And now maybe we're in a position to, make that more official.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so are you contemplating like a consultant to put this together?
Yes.
Yeah. And who, do you know who it has to go through the procurement process, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to add another task, Peter, which is we don't have anything on here about outreach, and that's been a big.
Yep.
So I want to make sure that's a task, including the website cleanup and development, and that might be an area we could use help on. I don't know how taxed the IT department is, but we've had a lot of trouble getting them to help us update the website, and right now it's the last time they updated it, a lot of things got broken and they haven't fixed it. So our homepage with all the maps is pretty non-functional. So we could, I don't know if they're understaffed or what, but we could use some help there, at least fixing up what's there, and then we have plans, in our meetings.
That's like a perfect
updates.
example of a liaison connection,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Great.
Because I don't have the answer for you right now, but
Okay.
I understand the frustration, and
Okay.
I know that there's been a lot of work on the website And so we want to, appreciate all the effort, but also if we find things that are broken, we want to make sure
Yeah.
we follow up.
One thing, I think, so they let me do this for Historic District. The town is a Google, they do use Google for their main software for Gmail and Google Docs. And there's also Google Sites, so you can make a Google website, and it's owned by that same town account, your TCMC account or your Historic District account. And that way, the IT department was comfortable with me doing that, because if I left town, it was still owned by a town account, and it could get passed to the next person. So they might let you do something like that.
We talked about that.
Yeah.
I think you didn't want to, but if they don't have the resources, it frankly would take way less time for us to do.
That's what you did with Sustainable Green, something like,
Well,
is it, but it's not a Google.
a town account.
Yeah,
It
see,
is a
that's-
Google site, but the town doesn't own it. It was created before the town had a
Switch to
rule
Google.
about this. So, yeah, if they wanted to give
So
it
that
up
might be
to us, we
something we
could
could work with.
do our own and pull it off. Yeah, because I think it would just be much more efficient and
It'd be a great job for a summer intern.
Yeah, you could get it. Yeah, for sure.
Do we not have any kids home for the summer?
So one
Between
thing I wanted to
us.
mention about the liaisons too, we have this in our survey too, but I think it could be appropriate to have liaisons from different age groups too, like a youth commission, a council on aging liaison. Not that I want to put too many rules with you, but there's a lot of other groups, Commission on Disability liaison, to find out how those groups may have different trail needs or not, trail needs and wants.
Is there any downside to having, I didn't see a downside to having multiple liaisons as long as they weren't taking up seats on the committee, right?
Right, and as long as it's
These are more
not too
informal anyway.
tasking for, if there's 7 of us on the committee and we each have, 15 groups we've got to go to, that gets a
No,
little tasky.
these are liaisons to you, like
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
newly
yeah.
formed disability committee or the
Right.
council on aging. They
Oh,
would
no,
have,
that-
they
absolutely.
would have access. It's actually not anything special. They could still come,
Right,
but,
but-
you
would
know, a
they
little
want to put that in
formalization.
their charter in the way that we're putting liaisons to other groups in our charter? I mean, this is sort of,
Well, and again, some of this is designed that you folks kind of tell us, hey, it's critical that you reach out to these groups, and maybe it's not maybe it's not twice a year, maybe it's just,
No,
but there's
but
got to be a
it's-
way to encourage that.
It's about
interaction.
knowing who's on the committee.
Yeah.
And, for example, the way I envision it, you need to outreach at least early and sometimes to the Council on Aging, because you probably don't have
Right.
that direct connection. So you have to make an effort to find, and that's part of the exercise here is brainstorming who kind of has agency in and interest in the trails, which is everybody.
Yeah, let me dump this back on you folks. You have liaisons to all this group. Maybe part of your job is to say, hey, here's the groups in town. When you meet with them the first time and say, hey, here's the groups in town. Which of these do you think you would like a representative to come talk to you about kind of what their job is? I mean, that might be a way to do it.
It might, and I don't have any objection to that. What I'm trying to figure out is how to communicate, when I think about it, that we need to, when we're thinking about a resource like this, how we are making sure we contemplate the needs of a broad spectrum of folks who aren't necessarily the guys who have hiked all over
Right.
the eastern
Right.
seaboard, whatever, right? So how do we make our trail network and build our big picture vision, and make sure we know what we all think, and we probably do know a lot what kids want or what youth want or what seniors want, but I don't know, we cannot know unless we are differently abled. We cannot know what folks who are differently abled need or
Our
want.
interaction with Chris Ann has been invaluable, and Jamie before her, because they bring a different perspective as parents with little kids that
Yeah.
we frankly don't have.
We're
And we've
past
got a
that,
little
right?
bit, and we were grandparents of little kids, so
Yeah.
we bring
Yeah.
some of that, but
Yeah.
there, and it really is important to get that information, and you don't know what you don't know, so it
I know.
you know, it's hard.
I know, and I don't know that like a formal liaison thing is the way.
Yeah, it
Right.
can be.
I think the
informal.
liaison section does say something about the, doesn't it say that there should be some flexibility? Other
Yeah.
groups may be added based on a vote of the committee.
Right.
The intent is to be inclusive to the extent
Right,
practicable.
and that's where I think from a practical point of view, you're the liaison to the senior folks, and you go talk to them, and they say, man, we really want to be out on the trails, and boy, that, you know, we've got 6 members here who are just like really pushing to do that, and what are the trails available in town? And then maybe they get added to this list, or at the very least, one of
Yeah,
us gets
yeah. So it's-
tasked with going and
Right.
presenting.
Right, so we don't want to play telephone either, right? We don't want Muriel in charge of that messaging, because I'm not the trails expert.
No.
I'm aging up
You're the
here, but I'm
liaison,
not
though.
necessarily, right?
And that's the, you know.
Right, I know.
You
So it just, there
talk
just
to
has
them.
there has to be a mechanism for making sure we include a variety of voices that aren't the 7 of us that have hiked our whole lives.
So
Yep.
the groups you were thinking were, like, can we identify them now and maybe?
We
There's
don't
a
really have
list on
time
the
for it.
survey that we brainstormed.
Okay.
But there certainly could be others.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
The
All right.
three in particular I have noted though were Council on Aging, Youth Commission, and
Disability.
Commission on Disability.
Yeah. Okay, I think we have to end this
Yeah, I know.
timing
Sorry,
wise,
that's enough.
plus a little bit. Okay, moving on, item 4, charge of the Upper Charles Trail. And again, I apologize sending my thoughts around on this very late.
And I can send this to you too, I think.
Well, again, we don't have a whole lot of time,
Okay.
so let me kind of just touch on.
But if you can send it so we have it as part of the record, that'd be good.
Right.
But not now, you're saying.
So I think a lot of the purpose and stuff, we all know kind of what the Upper Charles, and what I'm calling is the Upper Charles Trail Building Committee. Trying to have the issue of multiple trails committees in town has been problematic for folks. So having one trails committee and then a building committee for the Upper Charles building, I think would be one way to address that issue. And then I think the purpose and responsibilities were pretty consistent with what was there in the past. Discussion, you know, presenting something to the select board for the select board's consideration, meeting with the public and working with the public and listening to the public, coming up with the development plan, and then guide construction of the trail moving forward. I did add in a piece of working with the Town Trails Committee to make recommendations regarding budget and key milestones, some of the things I've already discussed as to how we would interact.
Sorry, so we don't have the documents.
Yeah, no, that's, and again, we don't have a whole lot of time, so I'm just kind of skimming through, so.
I'm really a visual person because of my hearing issues. So,
okay.
okay, but anyway, you can email it later.
Yeah. And then the idea is to have the thought was in terms of composition, very similar to what we call for with the Trails Committee. In other words, 7 members, all appointed at large, and at least one member who's a crossover member. And again, interest in trails being kind of the primary driver. The only difference being experience on multiple types of trails, or in particular experience with various multi-use trails across different areas. Shared use paths would be great here. In other words, experience on the type of trail that we're trying to build here.
And your point that major decisions, expenditures, et cetera, should be a joint vote.
Correct.
Of the 2 committees.
Right, and then in the same way recommended to
Yep.
the select board to make the final decision.
Is that in here, the combined and the 2/3? I saw it in the trails one. but
It
I-
may not be.
Okay.
The 2/3 is in there, such vote to require a 2/3 majority, but I didn't spell out the
And that's of
particular milestone.
both boards.
Of both boards,
Where is
correct.
that? I'm not seeing it.
This is the top of the second page, first paragraph, second page. last line.
Just above the section of
And
composition.
again, this is,
Oh,
this
got
is
it. Yeah, okay.
a straw person
Got it.
for,
Yep.
you know, just to take what was out there and say, okay.
So basically, Peter, you're just saying, like, based on our conversation last week, Muriel, where you said you didn't know how things might look. I think Peter went off and said, here's a take it. You said
one.
you didn't provide any details. So I think Peter went off and said, hey, here's one thought about it, and put together a straw man on how it might look as input, as you guys are
Right, and
considering.
trying to consider the things that were issues in the past. I mean, I think, you know, the trail focus.
So I think that it makes sense for you folks to sort of finalize your thoughts and feelings and submit it formally as a committee. I think that
Right.
makes a lot of sense.
Okay. And yeah, the idea would be to annotate this too. So
Yep.
the reason we're thinking of a 7-member board is
Just perfect.
this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
perfect.
Exactly. Here's, you know,
Yeah, much appreciated, so.
and obviously the same with the Trails Committee charge as well. Here's why,
Yeah.
you know,
No,
here's the
absolutely.
basis for this from our perspective.
One thing I just also want to point out is, while the Upper Charles building of it is a big project, it's a project. It's not a permanent committee, whereas the Trails Committee is sort of more in perpetuity. There's no end date, so they're definitely a little different.
Yeah, and I think that you know, that might be the first order of business, is just understanding how it's different, and how, I mean, ultimately, the only objective is to get to a place where we're all working forward in the same direction. That's the ultimate goal.
Will we be able to view this before?
Yes, I'll send out the minutes to everyone, and I'll include these with that.
Thank you.
And they are on our Google Drive right now, if you felt like going home and looking immediately. If you go to the town's Google Drive under Trails Committee, there's a folder for meetings and minutes, and all the documents are in there right now.
And so a question.
Oh, that would have been good to know.
I know, I
Few
was going to
minutes ago.
tell you that earlier, but it was so late in the process.
People can't hear Jane at home or on the recording if you're not, I'm sorry.
Oh, sure, my apologies.
No, that's okay.
I was just, Jay Moran again. I was just wondering if the select board is going to review all of this with both committees before it's finalized.
So we don't, you know what, Amy's got the process in her hands, but it's really right now it's the survey and also any input that people want to give us, right? That's what we're looking for, is any input that people want to give us. So yes.
Yeah, we want to get input from both the two committees, from the survey. We discussed maybe a public forum, but that's a little hard in the summer, so I'm not sure if that's,
Very hard in the summer.
but yeah, so we would take the input from all sources before making a decision.
One thing that's a little hard is serial and separate communication doesn't allow discussion like we're having now. I don't know if there's any way to have a forum where the groups get together and actually sit in one room, and maybe when you get to the point of having a proposal, that might be, well, it's just hard,
Thank you,
everything by separate
Linda,
emails.
because you remind me of what the select board asked Norman to do, was to have just that, a joint committee meeting between the two committees, for the two committees to sit down and Norman facilitate that. And I was going to ask what happened to that, because I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah, there is so much value. I mean, I appreciate that opportunity so much, and it's just easier for me to, you know, to see the pieces come together and to follow the conversation, and rather than have it be serial, like you said, or on paper. So include that in your feedback, and we'll do the best we can do to have a process whereby we can be a little conversational. I mean, I would appreciate that too.
And I only say that because of the magnitude of this particular.
It's big.
and how long it's been going on. And although it sounds like a pain in the butt to have a joint meeting and have it take a few hours, it might save a lot of time
Yeah.
in the end.
I agree. I think we're at a critical point, and I think that we should do it once and do it right. And if we have to take a little bit longer to do that, I think we would be wiser to do that. And I would ask for that joint meeting with Norman facilitating, as the select board originally envisioned that.
I was thinking the meeting might be more for input on the charge, but it could be.
Well, it could be other, I mean, one thing that caught me by surprise tonight was the budget conversation, because the needs of our committee is so very different from the needs of your committee as far as the budget goes, because ours is strictly around going for grants and following up on the state mandated charges to qualify for those monies. I mean, it's pretty simple. And I don't see where your committee would have a voice in that.
I know at the last meeting, I think it was you, Muriel, who brought up, do we sometimes not want to chase a grant that doesn't serve us just to get the money?
Correct.
Yes.
That might be a conversation that an outside voice could help with as one example. And it's not like,
Yeah, and I don't think we're going to solve that tonight, but that
Right,
might
no, it
be
wasn't
a
intended.
topic for
Right.
this joint meeting.
Yeah. All right, we need to keep moving.
yeah. And the meeting can't be too big either. It can't take on everything if we
Right.
do have
So
the
we're
joint
gonna, once again, we're gonna skip the dogs.
Yep.
And move to Trail Volunteer Day so that we can get out of here at 9.
And John will be happy.
Right.
Shane.
Exactly. So the options that we discussed for the Trail Volunteer Day, which is July 1, is rock moving at Brook Hollow or rock work and bench cutting at Greenwood, both of which required expertise, i.e. Steve Lewandowski, to help us do that. Steve is available, so he can do that. The other option, when I was looking for a backup that I came up with, was Echo Trail.
Yep.
At Echo Trail, they've knocked down one of the hand railings yet again. Lovely somebody. And
We're not assuming.
there's more parking, clearing, moving the gate in to where there's a bench and allowing a couple more parking spaces that does fill up. Might be, again, something relatively simple that we could do. And as far as my personal priority, I would lean towards the Echo Trail because I think it's a bigger bang for the buck. Of course, why that trail gets so much use in the summer when it's just an out and back trail is you know, a question for another day, but anyway, so thoughts?
The Brook Hollow
think-
rock moving isn't urgent.
No, and I think because some of the issue on the Echo Trail is encroaching vegetation, it's
Correct.
just going to get worse as the season goes on. So, you know, it may make more sense to tackle that sooner rather than later.
Fran, any thoughts?
I'm kind of with Chuck.
Yeah. Okay. So look for a motion to have the Echo Trail work as our July 1st workday.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Unanimous and so carries. Okay, our next meeting will be sometime in July. I haven't picked a date yet, but we'll soon, mid-July. The idea is to have one meeting a month. Items for the following meeting, other than obviously the coming up with the Trails Committee charge.
Yeah, further work on the charge. Yeah.
Dogs, yes. Start that process.
Don't do it.
I mean, I think in fairness, with dogs, we've all been kind of skirting around the edges. Yes, we have this law in place, but, you know,
Well,
people want more, people want
Just
less.
understand what you want, though,
No,
what you want to
absolutely.
be about doing,
Just,
right?
I think just an education, an awareness
I do too.
campaign.
That's our
Some
biggest
folks
thing.
just
I
do
do
not
too.
realize
Yep.
that others are
Right,
worried
and-
about dogs.
And I think the idea of either selected trails on certain days that are no dogs, maybe a way to help folks who want to get out in the woods. And even something like that increases awareness. Oh, why is this trail no dogs on such and such a day? And then you could have a QR code even and say, this is why.
So John and I identified, we have 2 sanctuaries in town that don't allow dogs as policy. Waseca and
Whitehole,
Whitehole Woods.
the conservation area behind it, yeah.
Stonewall.
Right.
So I think that gets to
Yeah.
one of Muriel's questions is, can it be simple? Can you go there and know there's not going to be dogs?
Right.
Those are 2 places.
No, that's great. And getting that, again, a public forum gets that information out so that somebody who is very dog averse can say, oh, okay, I've got these 2 places. And people with dogs conversely say, oh, just because there's just, I've seen dog owners ignore signs, hard as that is to believe.
Shocked.
Yes.
Conversely, is there, if the answer is no, but is there a trail system or 2 that could be available for off-leash dogs?
Absolutely, and maybe certain days, again.
Yep.
And again, it's,
Yeah, because
this is allowed.
I had, my little rescue, I don't ever take her in town, but my little rescue when we got her, was an amazing hiking off-lead dog. She stayed right with us, and she just loved it. She's this little agile dog, and it was great as long as we were places where that was acceptable, right? She loved it. We loved letting her.
Pratt Field
Yeah,
might be.
A lot of,
Yeah.
some dog owners, with the, whatever it's called, the way you can wing the tennis ball without breaking
Yep.
your arm.
Yep.
There's not much place around you can do that, but place like Pratt Farm.
Turns out
in
my
the
side
Meadows
yard,
would
by the way,
be
but
something that could be designated.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's the idea, is to kind of, this very controversial item, try and work through it and raise awareness as we're going through that process.
So one other
All right,
item
so
is we want
dogs.
to talk about the next Kids Walk,
Kids Walk.
kids event. If we have time, at the very least, I'll give an update on if we've made any progress with the website correction, and I'll talk to the town about taking on a website on our own. I don't think we're going to have time to do a whole
Okay.
walkthrough of our plans, and if we're going to do it on our own, it would change anyhow.
All right. So Trails Committee charge, I assume the Upper Charles Building Committee UCBC charge, and both of those are recommendations that we'll put together to the select board. Dogs will be, again, we'll put a letter together to go to the select board and say we're gonna take this on unless Fran strongly disagrees and convinces all of us no.
We're going to be a leader, but we're not going to do it on our own, is my
Right.
hope.
No,
Very
absolutely.
careful. I think there's other things that this group can have positive impact on. Dogs is a tough.
It is.
No, it is a very tough one, but I think it's not low hanging fruit. It's complicated,
Yeah.
but I think it's, as a first pass, doable. And I think starting early to raise the public awareness is pretty critical.
It would be an
Anything else?
ongoing.
Yeah. No, I think if we took what we just heard in this last 5 minutes and put that in a document, that would be a huge step forward for
Well, you
the town.
might remember I already created a document with ideas and linked to
I
it
know.
in the minutes, so we
Yeah.
can add these ideas to it.
Yep.
And work from there, and we can add to it what other groups we might want to work with on this.
Yep. Okay.
Good.
Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
And thank you.